Hey everybody. A few years ago I did a little pictorial history of the small neighborhood that I grew up in for the first few years of my life that I remember. We moved here when I was a baby. I don't remember moving here, but it is the first place I remember living. We lived here until I was about 7, and we moved out for a couple of years and we moved back. And then when we moved out, my aunt and uncle moved into that house, and it was a house that my grandfather and my uncle and I guess it'd be my great uncle built. And but it was behind me here. I wanted to do a little video tour of this place for a while, and I had a little extra time today, so I thought I would swing by here and do a little tour of what we all called the neighborhood or the block. And back when I was a kid, it was kind of the only thing out here. There weren't very many people who actually lived out here, and so we'll do a little walkthrough of this, and surrounded by stuff now. We'll check it out. The first thing I'd like to do is up here on the corner. I wanted to actually shoot from up there, but that's B&B pipe on both sides of the road here. It's a huge operation. They got forklifts going back and forth, golf carts. So I didn't want to get up there and get in their way. But when I was a kid, when we lived here, that's Rosedale Highway right up there. This is Ware Drive. But on that corner up there was what we called the Little Red House. I don't recall if it was actually little, but it was red. It had a pomegranate tree, and the people who lived there didn't care if we picked the pomegranates. We used to have wars with them, get in trouble from our parents for getting the pomegranate stains on us. Anyway, and on this corner over here was the Carl Bookout Auto Salvage Yard. It was a wrecking yard. It was a pretty big place. It came all the way back into here somewhere. And the Fruitvale School, where I went to school, is right over there. It's Vista West High School now. But when we would come home from school, we'd stop by there with our report cards. Carl would give us a dime for every good grade we got. He was a really cool dude. This place right here, it's Alliance Trucking, Pence Petroleum, Mobile Products, Pence Petroleum Distributor. It was the Signal Oil trucking facility when we were kids, and hasn't changed much since I was a little kid, except for that building in the middle there. Little plug for Alliance. But we just called this the trucking company, and it really hasn't changed much at all in all these years. All right, we'll move on down into the neighborhood. One more thing I'd like to note before we move up the street is my great-grandfather. His name was Claude Clay Ellis, the man this street was named for. My uncle, my mom's brother, who passed away as a very young man in a boating accident, his name was Charles Clay Anderson. And my name, as you can tell by the name of my channel, is Mark Clay McGowan. So the middle name Clay has been passed down through the generations. And my grandson, Aiden, his full name is Aiden Riley Clay McGowan. So the name lives on. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, that's where we were just a minute ago. This is the corner of Ware Street and Claude Avenue. Claude Avenue was named for my great-grandfather, Claude Ellis. It was my mom's granddad. And one of his sons, Charles, bought all this property. I don't know how many acres or how much it was or any of that stuff, but son, the family, his name was Charles, the family called him Son, and hey, there's a Fruitvale School District bus. They come down this street. Now, when I was a kid, that was the bus stop right there on the corner of Ware and Claude. Point of interest. But anyway, After son bought this property, he bought houses from other parts of town and moved them in here. And he owned every one of them, with the exception of the one we lived in. He sold that property to Granny and Granddad, and that's where they built their house, which was right here. This was 6816 Claude Avenue. The house is gone. There's a company called DCS Grading and Paving. I believe this is actually the back of the business right here. But anyway, this is where our house was. I said we lived there for a while, and my aunt and uncle lived there when they moved out. A friend of ours named Pat Young moved in there, and she lived there for quite a while. I believe she may have been the last person who lived there. And right across the driveway was where Granny and Granddad lived in their trailer. And this corner over here, this lot was always vacant when I was a kid growing up here. That trailer wasn't there. That is actually now, that whole lot there is BG Oil Tool. And a guy named Bob Gunning, my dad's best friend. They grew up together. They're still best friends. And at 80 years old, pretty cool if they've been friends that long. But Bob bought this property, put that trailer on it, and made a successful business out of this. He retired a few years ago, sold this business for a boatload of money, and I'm happy for him and proud of him, and I'm really glad that worked out for him. It's hard to tell exactly where everything was because it's so different now. This is the trucking company. That chain link fence wasn't there when I was a kid. There was just a push down barbed wire fence. We would walk across the corner of the field over there if we were going to school or to the store. We never went over and messed around in the trucking company. We knew we'd get in trouble for it. And so I remember one of the kids, a guy named Billy Dobbs, he climbed up on those tanks one day, and we were sure the FBI was going to come and arrest him. But as it turned out, no one showed up at all, and he climbed down and survived and didn't get in trouble or anything. Right here, where this pile of asphalt and dirt is, and that yellow machine, is where Granny and Granddad Ellis's house was. Granddad Ellis died when I was about 5. I remember the ambulance being out front. I didn't know what was going on. Later on, my mom told me that he'd passed away. He had a heart attack or something. I don't really remember. And Granny Ellis, after that, never got out of bed again. At least not for anything other than go to the bathroom. I don't ever remember seeing her outside again after Granddad Ellis died. And we would go over to her house and go in there and visit her in her bedroom. And she wasn't a mean old woman, but she wasn't friendly either. But still, we'd go visit her. It was cool. She was kin. But anyway, that was where Granny and Granddad Ellis lived. This house here with the little fence around it and the trampoline in the front yard, that's where my great uncle Charles, who owned all this stuff, lived. The family called him Son. His wife's name was Jewel. The family called her Cooch. I don't know why. I'm not going to speculate. But Son was he was a nice enough guy. He was distant, strange. He was on the landing at Iwo Jima in World War II, and the family said he was never the same when he came back. And after being a World War II history buff like I am, and knowing what happened there, I can understand that. Cooch was a really cool gal, and really liked her. They had a son named Truman Puckett. It was from Jules' first marriage, and he was buddies with Mom and Dad. They ran around together. Family called him Jabbo, and he was one of my heroes when I was young. I really liked him. Son and Cooch used to babysit us every once in a while. And this little house here on the corner used to be, we called it the Pink House, and it was pink for many years. And we lived there when I was very small. I have no memory of living there, but we did live there. But quite a few families came in and out of there. And right here about where those barrels are, was an open oil sump. It didn't have a fence around it or anything. Well, it had a fence around it, but it was all crushed in. And over the years, people had thrown trash in it. I believe I have a picture of it also, and if I can find that, I'll put it in here. And there were two empty oil tanks, one laying on its side and one that was still up that had the door off of it. And they sat right about there, just beyond where those 55-gallon drums are. And we used to go play in those. Totally toxic, I'm sure, as was that sump that we used to play in and walk over, and we didn't play in the oil part of it. We all survived. People are worried about using the wrong kind of Kleenex now. And across from here was an open field here that went from here over to about where those the yellow machines are over there, and there was a fence there. Beyond that was Jimmy Mongee's horse. He boarded horses and trained horses, and the first job I ever had, I worked for Jimmy cleaning horse stalls. In the middle of this field, when I was a kid, was a wooden standard oil derrick with a pumping unit on it. And when I was about 5 or 6, Mom and Dad had gone out with Jabbo, and we were staying at Son and Cooch's, and this rig caught on fire. And always remember Mom and Dad, they came in there, and Debbie and I, my sister, were sleeping on the living room floor, and they came and picked us up, and we walked out the door, and I can remember to this day the heat, when you could feel the heat from it and I could hear the sound. I was a little kid, scared the hell out of me. Everybody was worried about if it fell this way, it'd burn the houses, and the other way it'd get in the horses, and ended up just collapsing on itself. But it was a pretty big event in my childhood. All right, move on down to some of these other places. And this little road through here has always been here, but no one ever drove their cars on it except my uncle's son, and he'd pull in here and he'd park his trucks right there. Son was a sportsman. He had a big old nice pickup with the dog kennel things in the back of it, and he'd take his dogs out and go hunting. And they had a hammock in their front yard. Son had a hammock over there between that one tree's chopped down now, but the other one's still there, and Son had a hammock stretched out between those. I used to love to sit in that. This house right here, family named the Youngs lived here. They were good friends of ours. I'm still friends with all of them that are still around. Jill, Paula, Davetta, they all still live in Bakersfield. Randy passed away. He was a year younger than me. Pat and Dave, the parents, have both passed away. But after they left, a family named the Odins moved in there, Johnny and Jimmy. And me and Johnny were the same age, and we got in a fight one time, and he kicked my ass. Still embarrasses me to think about it, that I didn't put up as much fight as I should have. This wasn't a house when I was a kid. This was a shed. It was actually back further by the fence. It was the washroom and everything for Son and Coots. That's where they had their little... Son had a tool shed out there, and the washer machine was out there. This house here, I can't remember the people who lived there, but there used to be a grapefruit tree in the front yard, and when those things came in, everybody was welcome. There was no fence around it. Everybody was welcome to come and take grapefruit. They didn't care. This was one of the houses that Son moved in later. I remember I was probably about 7 or 8 when Son moved this house in, and a family named the Thompsons moved in here. And there was Daniel and David. David was my age. Daniel was 2 or 3 years older. Their dad came home one night drunk and was beating on his mom, and Daniel shot and killed his dad with a rifle. And they moved out right after that. This house right here, I remember clearly when Son moved this house in. I was 8 or 9. It was green, had wood siding, looked like it had been a duplex or something at one time, if I remember right. They had didn't look really anything like this. And a family named the Varners lived there. Matt and Connie were about my age, and they lived there. So I don't remember anyone else ever living there before we kind of stopped hanging around here. That building there, my cousin Truman built that house, and he built it to rent it out, get some income out of it. And the Youngs moved from the house back there into that house, and they lived there until the days when we stopped hanging around. And there used to be a cinder block house about where that container is, and that's where the Dobbs family lived. D-O-B-B-S. We were real close with that family. They watched us all the time. Doc and Elizabeth Dobbs and their kids. They had good grief. Charles, Rachel, Curtis, Billy, Jerry, Mark, and Danny. Mark and Danny were the closest to my age. We played a lot, stayed over there, ran around a lot, had a lot of great memories from that old house. They had a garden and grew all kinds of crap out there, and chickens, and nice family. I'm still in touch with Debbie. I forgot Debbie Dobbs. I'm still in touch with her on Facebook. Mark and Danny are both on my Facebook, but they don't ever get on there. I don't know what became of any of the other brothers. This was an alfalfa field. None of these buildings were here. The old Fishback place, and I should say right now we're on Fishback Avenue. It just runs from there right up to there, plate processing. There was nothing here but this little front part here back to about where it's Cullivan, to where that last truck is parked right over there, was a little open field. We built underground forts in it, and but on the other side of that was Homer Baker's alfalfa field, and he planted and tended to and harvested and baled everything there all by himself. He didn't have anyone helping him. Then right about here where the end of this building is was another standard wooden derrick. It's good right about there. I think I have a picture somewhere of me and my mom and dad when I was an infant, with them standing in the back part of our property with that rig in the background. I'll see if I can dig that up, and I'll post that too. I don't remember the name of the people that lived in that house back there, but the guy had a really cool train set that was already all built and laid out and everything, and we bought that from him. I was kind of into model trains when I was younger, and I had that for about 4 or 5 years. But we moved into the house on Beach Street when I was 13, and there just wasn't room for it, and so I sold it to another model train enthusiast. The young lady who lives in that house just came out and was wondering what I was doing, thought I was somebody trying to sell the properties or something, but no, told her I'm just a interested observer with a past in this neighborhood. This house right here, a family named the Potts lived here. I don't remember what their son's real name was, but they called him Dinky. He was about 5 or 6 years older than me. We were out here playing one time, me and a couple of my friends, and we built a dirt volcano with a hose through it, and we were going to make it erupt. And Dinky came over, and there used to be a bunch of palm trees over there lining the end of Ware Drive, and he came over with a palm frond and messed our volcano all up, and I threw some dirt at him, and he punched me in the mouth, and all I remember is bleeding, and knocked a couple of my little baby teeth out, and I went screaming home. And my dad came down here, and his dad and my dad stood out here and barked at each other, and it was one of the more memorable moments of my childhood. And right over here is actually where the Fishback home was. It was abandoned. I never remember anyone living in it. It was green. It was an old wooden house. It had a big water tower, and then like chicken coops, and not a barn, but some sort of building in the back. I don't remember when they tore that down. Right here, this was the back side of our property. There's DCS Grading and Paving. There was horse pens. My dad had some horses in there. There was a fence along here with a gate, and about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way up the property there was another fence, and all of the house and all that stuff was on the other side of that fence. And sometime in the 70s, I don't remember exactly when, the early 70s, Granddad rented this back section out after Dad and them stopped having horses back here. He rented the back section out to a guy named Marvin Fisher. Marvin moved a double-wide mobile home in here, a really nice one, and he owned 3 or 4 trucks. He had a trucking company, and they'd park their trucks in here and work on them and stuff. More people curious about what I'm doing out here. Don't blame them. I'm telling what people out here filming stuff. Who knows what people are doing? But I don't mind. I'm kind of getting used to having people give me strange looks out here with a camera talking to myself. Here on this corner was a house. Was a gray house. Family named the Gonzaleses lived there when I was little. Mark and Pete, Lewis and Jonathan, as they liked to be called when we were older. They had a son named David who ran around with my mom and dad. He was quite a bit younger than them, but I remember being a very mature guy. I always thought he was just a grown-up, and when he was 17, he was killed in a car wreck coming home from work one day. It was really devastating to the families. Both of them, they were all pretty good friends. And then a family named the Gelatiges moved in there for a little while, and when they moved out, my uncle Fred and his wife Essie moved in there, and my cousin at one point, my friend Kenny Hill lived there. I've known him since we were little. We're really super close still, so to the point where we call each other cousins, family, and Kenny lived there for a while. And moved up to the corner of Fishback and Ware. This right here, from where that building is up there, this whole piece, this was where A.S. Mason put their yard, a trucking company. That was a pretty big trucking outfit. It was just an empty, open field for a long time when I was a kid. I think A.S. Mason moved in there when I was about 6 or 7. And then right over there, about where the end of that fence is, there was a road that went back that way. It was lined with sugar cane, and we used to go get that sugar cane and peel it off and chew on it. But a family named the Sawyers lived back there. I don't remember anything about them other than that their name was Sawyer. Right there at this side of that intersection of Ware and Fishback, the pavement stopped, and this was a dirt road through here, and it was lined with palm trees. And right back there, about, I don't know, about where the fence is there on the left, where that fence starts, the road made a jog to the left, and the Baker house, that's where Homer and Ruth Baker lived, and that was originally the Ware residence, and Ware Drive was their driveway. And but anyway, this street, like I said, was dirt from here all the way up to Downing Avenue, and it was lined with palm trees from the intersection here on both sides up to the Baker house. And the Bakers, their daughter Darlene married my uncle Charles, my mom's brother, and shortly after they were married, my uncle and my aunt Doris, my mom's sister, her husband Holloman, and a friend of theirs named Johnny Newell capsized their boat in Lake Isabella in 1956, and they all 3 drowned. But this, let's see, this house right here has always been here. There was a family named, I think their name was Friesen, who lived here when I was young. There was another house right here that was an older house. This is where my mom was when the second earthquake hit in 1952. And she said she was trying to get out of their yard and the gate kept moving and she kept falling down. But anyway, that's what was here. Right about where that tree is, I swear that tree was there back then. The Hubbles lived there. Eric, Aaron, Colleen, and Iris were the kids. Colleen was the same age as me, and the rest of them were all older. But the Baker house was right about here somewhere, and it was the old style farmhouse. I just remember it being big. It was on a big, tall 3 or 4 foot foundation. Had a porch that went around this side, which we're facing north right now, so it went around the south side and then around the east side, and a big screened-in porch. And I guess it would have been right about here was a production workover rig company called, I think it was called Bowler, and that's where Homer Baker worked. He worked on the oil rigs and then had his fields that he did on the side. This house right here on the corner has always been here. I don't remember the name of anyone who ever lived there. If kids ever lived there, we never played with them, or they never played with us. Who knows, maybe their parents wouldn't allow them to come down to where we lived. Well, that's kind of brings to a conclusion tour of the neighborhood or the block. I've been accused a couple of times of being born with a silver spoon in my mouth. As you can see from that old neighborhood, that's absolutely untrue. If I was born with any kind of spoon at all in my mouth, it would have been maybe a wooden spoon or something. I don't even know if they had plastic spoons. If they did, we probably couldn't have afforded those either. But through all the things, we weren't dirt poor, but we certainly didn't have extra money. But I don't ever remember being hungry. I don't ever remember being cold. I don't ever remember anything bad about living here. Great memories, lots of fun, even through the tragedy that my family endured while we lived here and while they continued to live here after we left. And the fights, getting beat up, beating other kids up. And my memories of this place will always be fond. We had big giant games of war and cowboys and Indians, and we would use sticks for guns and bows, and we would use pull up weeds, clumps of weeds, and stalks of Homer's alfalfa with the big roots, dirt on the roots, and throw them at each other, and those were our hand grenades. Nobody ever grew up to be a killer. Or we played in oil sumps, we played in oil tanks. We had underground forts, and none of us ever died out there, to the best of my knowledge. None of us ever got sick. Tie this up, go home, eat some dinner, tell Jennifer and the kids about this. It was fun coming over here and checking it all out again. Yeah, it just brings back a lot of memories, a lot of good memories. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any comments, leave them in the section below. If you have any ideas, as usual, leave them below, or shoot me an email, and see what we do about getting them going. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. Hey, we'll see y'all later.